Physics has a dirty secret, infinity. Equations hit a black hole and explode. This video introduces UGM. Its goal is to unify all physics. This is where it starts.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today we're taking a mind-bending journey into a revolutionary concept called universal grid mechanics, or UGM. Now, our current models of physics are incredibly successful, but they have a fatal foundational glitch. We're going to explore exactly why UGM was created, how it fixes things by literally banning infinity from reality, and how it completely unifies the cosmos. Let's dive in. It all starts with a provocative question. What if our math is actually breaking reality? In today's physics, infinities are a massive problem. They failed to describe reality because true infinity simply doesn't exist in the physical world. Yet our models keep producing these impossible singularities. Think about black holes or the Big Bang. The equations just blow up. It's a stark contrast. Sure, on a chalkboard, mathematical infinities exist. You can divide by zero all day. But actual physical reality? It's bounded. It's finite. UGM points out a basic truth. We've been confusing the math used to describe the universe with the actual physical universe itself. So, Section 1. Let's talk about the real problem with these infinities. Because of these mathematical breakdowns, our modern understanding of the universe is totally fractured. General relativity, quantum mechanics, and classical physics simply do not align. When we try to combine them, we get mathematical nonsense. We've literally had to invent placeholders like dark matter and dark energy just to make our observations balance out. UGM was created specifically to fix this and unify these theories. Which brings us to Section 2. What exactly is UGM? Universal grid mechanics is an admissibility-first framework. How does it work? Simple. The creators went back to absolute first principles and strictly discarded anything that created an infinity. If a state can't remain continuous, finite, and locally consistent, it gets thrown out. Period. It's a strict physical checkpoint for reality. Moving to Section 3, banning the infinite. UGM achieves this through absolute rules. Just listen to Axiom 3. Every physically realized finite evolution preserves the admissible state domain and cannot carry an admissible state into physical divergence. In the physics world, that is a total mic drop. It essentially says a physical system literally cannot spiral into infinity. The simple translation here, no infinities allowed. If your math produces a singularity, UGM says your math has lost the plot, not that the universe has a bottomless pit in it. It's a hard boundary. It's all built on 5 fast logical axioms. 0. Physical existence needs an admissible state. 1. There is a persistent physical space continuum. 2. Which is huge. Physical reality comes before the math. 3. Outlaws that infinite divergence. And 4 says physical evolution creates bounded retained states. These are ironclad rules. Section 4. Let's look at the actual fabric of reality. UGM says the universe isn't just an empty box. It's a physical space continuum. Think of it like an ocean. The water, the continuum, persists and connects everything, while the waves, which are the local states, move and change across it. Under this framework, stable objects aren't magic isolated marbles. They are localized, bounded structural patterns, natural vibrations within that continuous substrate. Every particle is just an expression of that exact same space. And finally, Section 5, unifying the universe's biggest mysteries. By ripping out those impossible infinities and sticking purely to bounded first principles, UGM does something amazing. It allows Newton, general relativity, and alternative models like Mond to finally coexist. They just become different ways of representing one underlying finite system. Now this is where it all clicks. UGM maps our abstract cosmic mysteries right into simple physical states on the grid. Familiar matter? Just stable patterns. Gravity? It's simply the large-scale response to structural loading. And get this, dark matter isn't an invisible ghost particle. It's just trapped or bound modes in the substrate. Dark energy is simply modeled as dispersive, expanding modes of the continuum itself. The cosmos is completely demystified. Gravity isn't some isolated force. Dark matter and dark energy aren't magical entities we can't find. They are entirely logical, finite behaviors of the physical space continuum. Everything is connected and everything is bounded. The Universal Grid Mechanics Framework, specifically version 3.1a, establishes a strict admissibility-first ontology for physical reality. In this system, the familiar ingredients of classical physics, matter, continuous fields, and relativistic spacetime, are not assumed to be fundamental. Physics often assumes every mathematical solution must physically exist, creating fragile models that collapse under their own infinities. Classical mechanics traditionally builds reality by taking an empty, four-dimensional relativistic manifold and inserting independent point particles into it. The container is assumed to exist first, and the objects are added later. Universal grid mechanics, or UGM, rejects the empty container entirely. It grounds reality in a persistent, physical space continuum. Nothing is inserted. Everything is a localized deformation of this topological substrate. Version 3.02b starts with a strict foundational threshold. What conditions must a state or transformation satisfy before it can qualify as physically real? This is an admissibility-first approach. Physical existence is strictly limited to states and transformations that remain continuous, finite, and locally consistent under repeated evolution. In this framework, matter, observable fields, and measured spacetime are not primitive ingredients. They are proposed as effective structures, observable projections derived from the admissible states of the continuum. By removing these classical structures from the foundational baseline, UGM prevents literal mathematical divergence from being licensed as physical reality. After all, a physical space cannot tear itself apart simply because an equation fails to bound its own variables. We define the complete set of mathematically possible, physically stable states as the admissible domain, labeled D. This brings us to axiom 0. Admissibility is primitive. Any physically realized change must preserve local consistency and remain entirely inside domain D. If a proposed transformation leaves the bounds of D, generating a mathematical singularity or a discontinuous topological update, it ceases to exist physically. The framework flatly refuses to process it. Axiom 1 enforces this by requiring reality to be grounded in a persistent, connected physical space continuum. Physical evolution is the transformation of this state, but this substrate is strictly defined by persistence, connectedness, and deformability. It does not possess material mass. It is not an ordinary elastic medium, an archaic ether, or the classical spacetime manifold of general relativity. Think of a wave crossing an ocean. The water itself does not travel across the globe. The wave is a persistent pattern carried entirely by localized changes. Similarly, stable physical objects in UGM are candidate persistent patterns of the continuum. They move through localized, bounded deformation, not by translating an independent mass through an empty void. Because objects are merely sustained patterns of a substrate, the foundational laws of physics must govern the admissibility rules of the substrate itself. The behavior of the objects is a downstream consequence of those rules. To address how we observe these downstream consequences, UGM introduces Axiom 2. Ontology precedes representation. Mathematics and observation represent physical states. They do not dictate them. A common structural error in theoretical physics is treating the four-dimensional spacetime manifold, or the quantum field, as the absolute foundation of reality, rather than a functional model of its behavior. UGM formalizes this limit through observation maps, defining mathematical representation as R and the observable physical projection as pi obs. Classical measurement involves an interaction followed by a projection. An instrument interacts with a complete physical state, but it only returns a lower dimensional representation of it to the observer. This creates a strict many-to-one mapping dilemma. Two entirely distinct physical states, x1 and x2, can easily share the exact same observable projection. If you measure a room with a thermometer, the instrument reports a precise temperature through the expansion of liquid or electrical resistance. But that single value completely fails to capture the distinct microscopic position and momentum of every air molecule. Instruments solely interact with and return projections. Because of this mechanical limit, any physical theory built entirely on observational data is inherently incomplete. It cannot definitively claim to describe the deepest pre-geometric ontology of the universe. When the physical continuum undergoes extreme deformation, UGM applies Axiom 3. Bounded forward preservation. No admissible evolution can carry a state into physical divergence. Classical general relativity permits models containing absolute physical singularities, where mass density and spacetime curvature become literally infinite, such as the interior of a black hole. Under Axiom 3, this is an illegal physical promotion. The continuum state cannot diverge into infinity. It is constrained by a strict boundary of finite local capacity. An uncompleted formal divergence is simply an incomplete theory. A mathematical singularity has no physical standing unless an admissible, finite completion is supplied to bound the equation. To manage how the continuum handles these bounded deformations over time, Axiom 4 splits the state equation. The complete present state X consists of S, the present structural state, and M, the bounded retained state content. This retained state, M, holds a causal trace required for the system's continuation, but it has a hard limit. It does not accumulate indefinitely, and it often redistributes, dissipates, or releases entirely. If you bend a paperclip, the metal retains a permanent physical trace of the deformation. It holds the present consequence of a past action, but it does not record a perfect retrievable video file of exactly how or when you bent it. Therefore, multiple different evolutionary paths can result in the exact same present configuration. UGM defines these as continuation-equivalent physical histories. Version 3.02b strictly limits this foundational mechanism. It explicitly withdraws older claims that deformation history indefinitely persists or automatically generates an observable signal for our instruments to read. A system's future evolution is exclusively dictated by its present, finite, bounded state. By locking this rule in place, UGM neutralizes the threat of mathematical singularities and eliminates the impossible requirement of infinite path-dependent memory. Forcing theoretical models through the strict bottlenecks of axioms 0 through 4 creates a mandatory sequence for physical reality. The framework maps this out in equation 19, a derivation architecture showing exactly how classical physics must emerge from the underlying rules. It begins with the physical continuum, which undergoes intrinsic ordered change. That change eventually generates stable or metastable structural eigenmodes, what we observe as stable spectra. From stable spectra, we extract stable, observable processes. We count their cycles to invent measured time. Finally, we map measured time onto space to construct our classical model of an effective spacetime. Under the revised 3.02b status ledger, classical matter and theories of dark energy are stripped of axiomatic certainty. They are downgraded to candidate structural eigenmodes, phenomena that must be mathematically derived from continuum behavior, not assumed. The framework defines explicit failure conditions. If a proposed state produces reproducible, divergent futures from identical starting conditions, the state description fails. If it requires literal infinite physical quantities, the model is rejected. Crucially, numerical agreement does not equal physical proof. Fitting an equation to an astronomical dataset successfully does not automatically validate the underlying physical mechanism you use to build the equation. UGM forces theoretical models to respect bounded reality, ensuring mathematics describes the physical universe instead of breaking it. Interpreted merely as stable or metastable structural eigenmodes of the underlying continuum. This forces a re-evaluation of phenomena like dark matter. Instead of a new fundamental particle, it emerges as a trapped eigenmode of the local structure. Physicists are not measuring isolated objects floating in an empty void. They are observing the localized structural resonances of the continuum itself. The UGM ontology enforces a bounded, finite physical reality that strictly outranks mathematical theory. By placing admissibility and the three-dimensional space continuum first, the predictive domain of classical physics is permanently restricted to finite boundaries. Furthermore, both empirical anomalies and channel nulls are heavily constrained by projection mechanics and cannot be evaluated on assumptions alone. Metric spacetime and fundamental particles are not the starting point. They must be derived as effective structures from finite, continuous local states. They can never be assumed as bedrock.
For the complete axiomatic proofs and projection mapping, you must consult the foundational text.
Which leaves us with this incredible thought to ponder. If UGM is right and reality truly has no infinities, what other mathematical illusions have we been totally blind to? What else in our science textbooks is literally just an equation run amok? It's wild to think about. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the universe.
Jewel skies full, oh Lyra's a lyre, Vega's a light, guiding dreams through starry nights. In this tale of music and stars, find your story near and far.